Thank you very much. Before Sally starts moderating, I just wanted to introduce Sally. For those of you who were here, already know who she is. A prominent, very trustworthy journalist. I love her work. She invited me to the Washington Post on blog, Faith, on blog Faith, right? I used to write for that when I had the time. And Sally just has a book out. It's called Making Magic.
Called Finding Magic, a
Finding
spiritual
Magic.
memoir.
Spiritual memoir. So those of you who really want to know how magic works, please buy it. And on my right is another great friend, a supporter, and an ally, and somebody I respect and admire deeply. And I feel like I'm supported on both sides, like riding on wings. And Swanee Hunt is a former ambassador. Swanee served in the Clinton administration. She was right smack in the middle of the Bosnian War. Many of you remember that disaster. And Swanee and I have known each other for some time. In fact, I was inducted into Swanee's wonderful program called Prime Movers, which is a leadership cohort, where it's amazing, actually. She pulls together like 60 people from around the country who lead different movements. And I remember when I first was nominated, I said, well, why me? I'm not leading anything. And I think that maybe she knew something was going to happen in the future. But anyhow, Swanee has supported my work, has been a wonderful ally, and she also does tremendous amount of peace building around the country, around the world with women, and she's a great advocate for women in peace leading, and really women being at the table where peace building decisions are being made. And I think Swanee will speak about that. So I will turn it over to you.
Well, obviously, women and Islam is a difficult subject for a lot of people because the presiding view is that women are treated very badly in Islam. And certainly reading what you've written in your book about how the Prophet Muhammad admired women and how Islam has actually, including Mary, Jesus' mother, it's surprising how women seem to fare so badly in so many Muslim countries. And so I think that you're the perfect person to do this because you are so strong and so courageous and so outspoken and so independent, and you've got this wonderful supportive husband behind you. How do most Muslim women get to be you?
Well, so the good news is I'm just one person that's a visible person. There are Muslim women doing this work behind the scenes everywhere in the globe. And I can't tell you, that's why I know our future is bright, because there are women like me out there. Now, I became known because of the Ground Zero controversy. Many of you remember that. But I was helping my husband with his work, and in that process, I really delved into the knowledge of my faith, and I became equipped because of standing shoulder to shoulder and sitting by the side. But being in Swanee's retreats, I learned how to become my own leader because I was somewhat not comfortable with leadership, especially in a religious role, because it was not something that I had planned for myself. But it's the freedom and that rope that my husband gave me over the years. In fact, he's not here today. He said, well, if I go there, everybody will think this is somehow I'm involved with this project. It's your project. It's your moment. So yes, we are supported by men in our families. There are a number of imams here who work with their wives all the time, and we need to show this corrective, and it's because we have exemplars like Khadija, the wife of the Prophet, Aisha, who actually provided a lot of the knowledge that Muslims take for granted. So the Prophet was surrounded by women. He was not uncomfortable around them. Many of them were in the leadership role. And I needed to bring that back, visible, make it visible in the book. And so, me kind of being this person who's brought all these people together is also an indication of how this community is responding to that. Can you imagine 72 scholars, and mostly male and some women, kind of bequeathing this responsibility to me as a woman? What does that say? That symbolizes where the Muslim community is. They have no problem with women assuming leadership. And I'm so proud of them. I just can't tell you how proud I am. And if I become an example of that, where other women can take a cue from that and run with their own leadership, then by all means, because we need men and women together to work together, and we can't afford to just do this on our own.
Well, I mean, you know what I'm talking about when you see that, I mean, it's big news that in Saudi Arabia, women are finally going to be able to drive in another year. And people are sort of going, oh my God, you know, so backward. And you listen to Donald Trump, and talking about the Gold Star family, the Khans, and when Mrs. Khan, who was standing next to her husband at the convention and was clearly so emotional, and he said, well, you know, she didn't speak because she's not allowed to speak because those women, that they don't allow their women to speak. I mean, and that perception is out there, and of course he only reinforces it. How do you fight that?
With the hashtag. There was a
Me
hashtag.
too.
There was a hashtag right after that. People went crazy. Everybody was showing. I think I even showed my picture, you know, speaking out. So yeah, people are. We now have venues where we can speak back, right? We have hashtags. We have Twitter. We have Facebook. Everybody was Facebooking themselves to death, and I think that although it may appear that this is a really bad period for us, I'm really hopeful that things are going to get better, because there are more people who are vocalizing who they are and taking leadership positions. And I know Swani has a lot to say about this, because Swani also travels all over the world.
Well, I was just about to ask Swani how you got involved in this issue and where you see the role of the women in Islam going at the moment.
Right. Well, I was raised Southern Baptist down south. Okay. So
Well, women are not treated very well by the
Thank
Southern
you.
Baptists,
Thank you.
or the Orthodox Jews, or Hindus, or, you know, and most religions in the world, women are not treated well.
you took the words out of my mouth. So in my church for umpteen years, and I have a doctorate in theology, blah, blah. But in my Southern Baptist church, a woman basically cannot be at the pulpit. Well, she can't, you know, she can't be preaching. It was so strong, this prohibition in the church I grew up in, that there would be thousands of people in the audience, and a woman never sat at the chair where 4 or 5 men were sitting. She could not even sit there and go up and read a prayer. So, I mean, so I get really tired about people talking about another religion when the spread is so broad.
I just want to interrupt you for a minute. I interviewed Billy Graham's daughter, Anne Graham Lotz, who once tried to preach in her church. And she got up to the pulpit, and every single man in the room stood up and turned his back on her. So I know what you're
And
talking
some
about.
people here don't know who Billy Graham
Billy Graham
is.
is one of the he's in his late 90s now, was one of the great preachers and pastors in the country, and was called the pastor to the president because he literally was a spiritual advisor to 5 or 6 presidents. And his daughter is now well, she's sort of a preacher. She's a pastor in a different kind of a church, but not in the Southern Baptist tradition.
Right. And right after 9/11, I teach at the Kennedy School at Harvard. Right after 9/11, we put together, I don't know if you know Rena Amiri, but anyway, we put together a meeting with all kinds of scholars, all women, and not just scholars, but activists, etc. And it was called Transition Within Tradition. And it was about how Afghanistan could move forward. Now, here was a moment with a transition. And the point was that it really is okay. This is not some radical, idea that women step forward into this breach. I also want to say, when we act so much like we have an answer, people will be talking to me about those Muslims, and I say, oh yeah, actually I was involved, and I sort of sit back and relax, and I say, I was involved in trying to stop a genocide. I hosted negotiations. And let's see, in that one, the genocide was against the Muslims, and it was actually being perpetrated by the Orthodox and the Roman Catholic who got together. So I didn't say the Serbs and the Croats, right? If you're going to call them Muslims, then you better call the other people by their religious names.
Yeah.
Well, I also think if you look at what's happening with the Rohingya in Burma and the Buddhists are basically committing genocide against Muslims.
Who would have thought?
I mean,
Well,
and the thing that makes me crazy about it is the Dalai Lama does not speak out about this.
By the way, Dalai Lama has said that he hopes the next Dalai Lama will be a girl. So yeah, and so that's to say we have these actions, we have these words, and I don't believe that these are vicious people. I think there is something deeper in our consciousness that's tribal, and I can feel so much better about my faith if I know you don't have it. And so it's that whole business about the other. If I can make you the other, I will feel like, I don't know, I'm the original. I don't know. But I heard, Sally, I heard you being interviewed. And I'm going to write this down in my journal and repeat it to myself all the time. It was about a bumper sticker. And it said, I don't know, and neither do you.
I don't know, and you don't either. That's right. This was when I was talking about pluralism and how I don't understand people who are not respectful of others' faiths, because it's what you believe, it's what your faith is. It's not what you know. I was saying that we're all, the word agnostic doesn't mean anything to me because we're all agnostics. It just means you don't know. The Pope is an agnostic because he doesn't know.
Oh,
and then my favorite bumper sticker was, I don't know and you don't either. So we might as well just respect each other and whatever gets you through the night.
Yeah, as we would say back in Southern Baptist land, why not? Can't dance, too wet to plow. That's you all need to appreciate that. You can't unless you were there, to understand that you can't dance because your religion says you can't dance.
Unless you're from Texas.
Unless
you
can
understand it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. Well, part of the reason that I love speaking with Daisy is because of my respect for you. And when we met, it was before 9/11, and you were organizing women, etc. And we went up to my ranch, and we were in a teepee, and we'd done a horseback ride, and you took an hour, as each person there did, and you talked about, what you were doing, and you were so spread over so many major issues. And so to see this, excuse me, but to see this, having props count, this pulling together of all of your work and your interests, I am in awe of you. How long have we been working together? Yeah. Is it close to 10 years or more?
But I think, there are two different issues here. One of them is the perception of Islam in the Western world. And then the other issue is women. And as we've seen with the Harvey Weinstein's story, women have difficulties in even the most sophisticated and civilized Western world. But it's still, in the Muslim world, when you see women who are, not allowed out of the house without being completely covered except for their eyes, and they're, they have to be escorted by a husband, and they're all of these things in Saudi. The Saudis say, well, Mohammed bin Salman is making huge strides, but they basically say, look, look how long it took you to end slavery, and we're working on it. It's going to take us 100 years or a couple hundred years, which is what the Pope says and what the Catholic Church says about nuns. Well, it's going to take a couple hundred years before nuns are allowed to be, women are allowed to be priests. But there still is this, the perception of how women are treated in some Muslim countries is not wrong, in that they are discriminated against in a number of ways. And so what do you do about that perception? I know you are doing everything you can, but what about the women in those countries, and how are they trying to push forward and stop? There's still bride burnings in India, that sort of thing. Still genital mutilation in Africa. And so where do you begin if you're talking about women and Islam?
So, first of all, there are close to 750 million Muslim women in the world. And we are in 57 nations, and now we're in Americas and Europe, So there's 28 million Muslims right here, in the Western Hemisphere. So to say that there's only one perception of Muslim women is just, there's deep diversity. So on the one hand, we've had more than 10 women heads of state, and in countries that are Muslim majority countries, like Pakistan has had a head of state, Bangladesh, Indonesia, these massive countries, they had no problem electing a woman, yet we've had issues, right? What happened, just a year ago. And at the same time, the condition of women in some countries is dismal, and no one's denying that. And that's why I started WISE, so I could actually address those issues. Everything from child marriage to female genital mutilation and the kinds of stories that you hear about honor killings and everything. It does happen, and it does need to be addressed, but oftentimes it's not so much the theology, but it's more the custom and the local culture. So, for instance, now, overnight, theology is changing in Saudi Arabia. I was like, wait, what just happened here? I actually tweeted out, you're going to trip over yourself now. All of a sudden, women are driving. Now you've taken the mahram away from them. In other words, they don't need to be escorted now. So it's happening so fast. And who made these judgments so quickly? And why weren't these judgments made 20 years ago? I know Saudi women who are my sisters, who are highly educated but could not start their own business because somebody had done some cleric had done a religious ruling that women cannot own their own businesses. But yet, you see women on scooters all over the Muslim world. You see women entrepreneurs everywhere. And so, there is no leveling, playing leveling field. This is the issue that we have because we don't have that central authority. Right? So what does ISIS do? Very clever. Let's bring the Muslim community together because we're all divided, right? We're all fighting with one another. We're divided. That's the big lure. And why am I saying this? Because I just met a woman in prison. She's only 22 years old, young girl.
Where? Here? In this country?
Actually in New York. And
no, I mean in this country.
Yeah, in this country. And she became a recruiter for ISIS.
Yes.
And it's fascinating. When I asked her, why did you do this? You knew they were a terrorist group. She said, well, they're trying to unite the Muslim community. Look at how we are divided everywhere.
They're trying to what?
Unite the Muslim world. Like we are fighting with one another, Shia, Sunni fighting, everybody's fighting with one another, and nobody likes it. Nobody likes it when a father and mother fight. Nobody likes it when there's a fight in the family. Why should you? I know Muslims. How many Muslims here? Tell me how many. Raise your hand and say that you don't like the infighting within Muslims right now. Look at this. Nobody likes it. So the infighting Muslims
Had she seen the beheadings and all that kind of thing?
Which was fascinating.
And she thought that
I said,
was
what
uniting
did you think was
world?
happening there? And she says, I know, but they told us that it's towards a better end. Like, this is wartime. So certain things are going to happen during wartime. And we're just in a war, but ultimately we're going to build a beautiful state. It's going to be peaceful. It's going to be beautiful, and I want to be part of that. And then, of course, there was another big pull for her, and she said, I really want a family. Father died. No, his father was an abuser. Mother died. She practically has no family. and she's looking for family. And that was the lure. So what we have in this book is why do women join? I don't know if there's a slide up there. But this is all what they call the push and pull factors, the dissatisfactions or the discontents. You can see there are so many discontents, everything from social isolation and otherness. This can be Europe. Lack of agency, which a lot of women say, you know what, I'm not treated the way the prophet used to treat people. I am going to get more empowered by joining these people. And that's lack of agency. Devalue domestic life. Oh, in the West, they just want you to only work and they don't value motherhood. So I'll go to the caliphate and become a mother of the nation. And that's another lure. Muslim Ummah is dishonored. The whole Muslim community is dishonored because you're throwing bombs on us, you're doing this. That's another major pull. And moral corruption, there's no morality anywhere. I want to live a righteous, moral life. Love, marriage, sex. It's there. There are some people who are going seeking love, looking for a companion, and looking to be loved and being in that kind of thing. And they think when they arrive there, everything is going to be beautiful. And then guardians of faith, which is a very strong pull. Can you imagine somebody telling you, you can come here and be a mother of a new nation? That is huge responsibility, the mother of the ummah. And so these are the things that are being offered.
Was this woman disillusioned?
She was not disillusioned, as she was actually a very smart girl. But she had lived in 35 places in her life, in foster homes, so she's all over. She said, this is the only place I think I can have a resting place. Like, finally, I'll have a home. So we will be working with her. And then she's like very curious to see this. And I was so glad that she corroborated everything that's in here. And then she said, yeah, but you haven't addressed this issue. I said, well, you're going to address that issue. So she's probably going to work with us to really, shed some light on what goes on in a mind of a person. And so it's trauma, it's psychology mixed with a little bit of, she wasn't very religious, but she knew some religious terms here and there. And so what I'm saying is that some of the discontent you hear all over the world, there are different discontents and different push and pulls for different people. So there's no one way. And this is the one thing we want to explain to everyone. People do not only join for one reason. Now, the caliphate is dead. And the people are only going to resort to ideology online. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And so we want to make people aware that this ideology is not in your best interest. It's actually wrong. There's nothing to offer on the other side. And I'm hoping that.
Suwani, what role can you play in helping Daisy, particularly with these young women, turn them around?
I'm thinking about someone I'm working with. First of all, to be direct in your answer, I think the role I can play is to be an advocate, because I've worked in 60 countries, Sally, and exactly what Daisy is saying. I mean, what is culture? Culture is, right now, this instant, how we're behaving. Did your grandmother sit on a stage with a microphone? No, at least mine didn't. So when did the culture change? We can't locate any time. And it is changing faster now, that is what we know. But even for me, at 67, to be able to say, look, I have seen these situations over time. I think there's a real value in my age. And, to talk about the fact that it was this Christian nation that was carpet bombing Cambodia. It was the Christian nation of Germany that was trying to exterminate, the Jews. I mean, to remind people, because you know what? Someone was saying to me during the break, exactly, when the Paris terrorism, terrorists happen.
Charlie Hebdo.
What'd you say?
Charlie Hebdo.
Charlie Hebdo?
Yes,
Hebdo?
right,
Yeah.
right. So what is terrorism? It's not the act, because that many people die all the time of something or something else unusual. It's our reaction. We became terrorized. And maybe it's my age that lets me say, hey, we didn't have to become terrorized. And if we hadn't, they wouldn't be terrorists. They are only terrorists based on my reaction, and I have complete control over my reaction. Therefore, I have complete control over those terrorists.
Well, I must say, when I go to an airport, I'm more afraid of getting on the plane than I am of being blown up by a terrorist. I mean, the odds are better that there'll be something wrong with the plane than.
Right.
So you're right about that. I mean,
Yeah, but
but it still exists. I mean, the fact is they do still kill people.
Well, I mean, look, what can I say? So what? I want to say, so what? You know, they're not killing people at anything close, not anything close to what Christians have taken on over the years. And do we call the Christians terrorists? No, we reserved that word. We ought to be calling them,
Well, I think
war
the
criminals.
Las Vegas massacre, that guy was a terrorist.
Right.
Yeah.
Oklahoma City.
Yeah. But nobody's used the word terrorist.
That's the point. And when you say, what can I offer, Daisy, I think I can be something of a godmother, if you will, or grandmother, to say, hey, everybody, calm down. Just calm down. Here's some historical perspective.
So, Daisy, do you have a group of Muslim women leaders around the world that you're dealing with now? Are they mostly in the United States? I mean, how far is your reach? And for instance, I mean, we talk about Saudi Arabia and how quickly things are going, and I think obviously because of Mohammed bin Salman, this 34-year-old guy, who travels around the world and sees, he's just a different generation and sees that this isn't working. And so I think obviously he's going to have a lot of influence on that. But do you deal with Saudi women? Do you deal with Afghan women? Do you travel to those places, or Egypt, or any of the countries where there are issues with women? How much involvement do you get into?
So when we established WISE in 2006, we actually, brought together Muslim women leaders who were already leading change in their own communities, because I remember it was Swani's sister who said to me, she said, what are you trying to do? I said, well, I just want to change everything with Muslim women.
Just change the world.
I just
No
want to change the
problem.
world. And she said, well, you can't do it by yourself. And she said, you need numbers, and and you need an institution, and you need a name. So I came up with WISE name, and I said, okay, now I'm going to bring all the WISE women together, because I knew many women, and then they knew women, and then they identified other women. And so before we knew it, we had 200 women in the room, and they were from 77 countries. So yeah, we have our tentacles everywhere. And when something happens, we notify the women all over the world, so they're all going to get this now, and they're going to start working this in their own communities. That's the way we work. And within that group, we created a Shura Council, the first of its kind. And the women who were there from Saudi Arabia got this idea of Muslim women creating their own Shura Council. It's a consensus council, which actually, we interpret our own text, we look at our own scriptures, we do it. I mean, we're scholars, leaders, communities, smart people, and we issue these reports against female genital mutilation, honor killings, child marriage, women's leadership, the kinds of things that only women need that space to do it on their own, to provide an egalitarian interpretation of Islam. And then we spread it around, and then these people actually take it into their own communities. So I'll give you a very small story of how this network can work and the effectiveness of this network. So right after our first conference, I received an email from a Saudi woman who was a historian in Saudi Arabia. And it was a desperate email, and it said, oh my God, they are going to push the women out of the haram, which is the protected space in Mecca where Muslims go for the annual Hajj. You've all seen that beautiful space in the cubic structure. And women pray alongside men in that space. There is no, it's mixed. So she said, quote unquote, they want to push us out to make space for men. because they think they're running out of space. And they were quietly going to push the women out of that space. Can you imagine? They were going to change the history of Islam. This is a historian, and she was panicked. So I got the email, and I said, oh my God, I don't know what to do. So I sent it around to the women here, and one woman responded. She said, I am great at petitions. Inshallah, I'm taking a coffee pot, putting it next to my table, and I'm writing a petition tonight. She spent the whole night writing a petition. I circulated the petition to the Muslim women that I knew. They circulated the petition to all the other women that they knew. Even non-Muslim women signed the petition. And in the petition, there was a comment section. And the comment section was so pointed. Don't you dare. There's going to be a mutiny. You are changing our history. And, reminding them of, what Islam really is. 2,000 signatures. And we sent those 2,000 signatures discreetly. The whole petition went back to this woman who printed everything, and she took it. She had access to the king and said, here. He said, thank you. This is all we needed.
Really?
And it was killed.
Yeah.
So this is how it works. The power of people, like Swani's sister said, the power of numbers and the power of the global Muslim community weighing in on an issue that is theirs, because the holy sites do not belong to one people. They are custodians, but they belong to all of us. So this is how we work around the world on these issues.
Well, I think that's a great way to end the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swani.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Daisy. This has been very enlightening, I think, for me, and certainly I hope for you all.
Yes.
And,
3 amazing women. 3 very amazing
As
women.
I said to Daisy on the last panel, we had so many people and so little time. There's so much more we could talk about. But I think this is a great way to begin the conversation.